Welcome to today's episode of the Conscious Grief series. I am very honored to be joined with celebrity animal psychic Jackie Weaver today. And I was so happy when Jackie said yes to being interviewed. Jackie has a very niche area of communicating with animals that are with us now and animals that have passed on. So I just thought that this is such a big topic now because we really are a nation of animal lovers and they give us so much joy, so much connection, so much happiness. And obviously when that's not there anymore or animals are suffering and we don't know what's going on, somebody like Jackie can really help us in those situations. So Jackie, thank you very, very, very much for being here.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to try and help and spread the word and just help people and their pets.
Yeah, and Jackie has written 9 books and she has a book specifically on pet grief. So being this topic that we're talking about, conscious grief, that's kind of where we're going to focus on today. So Jackie, in your opinion, how would you define the emotion of grief?
I would say that the way I feel it can be completely and utterly consuming. It can send people's mental state into such high emotion that they can't actually focus on everyday things. And it can just send us into a spiral of despair. The other thing I would say in grief is, especially like you lose a pet, is like every day we've been giving love to an animal. And what I sensed was when I lost my little cat Stan, that I still had all this love to give him and he physically wasn't there. So all this love and everything was like building up inside me and I felt like it was choking me. So it is a huge physical and heartfelt emotion.
I love that because it really is like you're saying about where to place your love.
Yeah.
And, you know, when that animal or person is no longer there, you know, that's sort of like a very disorienting.
It does. It chokes you up and you can physically feel it. And what I do say to people is, you know, the animals live on in spirit. And as hard as it is, you just like keep thinking positive thoughts, sending information to them, because although they're not physically here, they can hear you and see you. So they don't disappear forever.
Mm-hmm. And how did you know that you had this gift, this very unique gift of being able to communicate with animals? It's so fascinating.
Well, funny enough, there's many people out there who are psychic but just don't realize it. And it can be quite difficult because as a child, I'd know things. And then my mother would say to me, well, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. So you've got a child telling you stuff and they're like, well, where'd you get that from? I don't know. And I would pick up things from animals or just seem to know how they were feeling. And time rolled on. I veterinary nurse and worked with animals and stuff. And then my life completely changed. Age 41, I had what was classed as terminal cancer. I was stage 4. And after the fact, they said to me, basically, they thought I had 4 weeks to live. But I came through. I was saved for a reason. And as a treat, I booked an animal communicator to come and talk to my horses and my dog. And she chatted away to the horses and stuff. And when she was talking to my rescue dog, my dog Sally then told her that I got information that came into my head. I could see pictures. I had dreams that came true. So she repeated all this to me, and I'm like, yeah. And she said to me, that's because you're psychic. And it was just like the penny dropped. I was able to receive extra information that lots of people do get, but lots of people don't. And so it just went on from there. And she said, look, I'll show you how to do this. Like I teach people as well. And it just transformed my life.
Amazing. And you don't need to actually physically be with somebody's animal, do you? You can do it with a photograph, is that right?
Absolutely. You just, and I can't explain how it works, but you manage to get in on a wavelength and tune to them. So it doesn't matter if they're in Australia, America, obviously in spirit and stuff. The only reason that I have a photograph, because it's just nice to see who you're talking to, but you can do it on description. And like people again will know this, that sometimes stuff just drops into their mind without them even asking. So therefore, again, they haven't had to have a photograph to see. And it just like sometimes just pops into your head, and that's because the image has been given to you.
Mm-hmm. And what inspired you to write the book about pet grief?
Well, I realized was that when I was helping, I was doing readings for people with their animals that passed, and obviously some people were absolutely distraught. And I began to realize, although I was connecting with their animal and giving them information and helping that way, I didn't have enough like tools in my toolbox to help them emotionally and stuff. So I studied EFT and NLP, which is basically just using techniques that like to get to people's mind rationally to try and help them. And so I did this, and then I started using it with my work, and people were like, oh, you know, that's really helping me. Even things like, you know, just tapping, which is so powerful. It's ridiculously easy, but it works. And then I just was suddenly inspired to put this down in writing. And I just sat down and I started writing this book, again, guided by my dog, Sally, who's on the cover. And it just flowed. It just came in all these different techniques and stuff. And the thing that I think is lovely is that people find the book so useful, but there's different techniques for different people. And so they can just pick up something and think, you know, actually, that helps me straighten my brain. That's helping me with grief. And even to like simple things like just logically dropping it into somebody's mind. For example, I'll say to a client, you know, when they're very emotional and stuff, and I'll say, well, okay, if I can ask you at this time, you know, is there anything that say happened in the past that really, you know, broke your heart, was as heartbreaking as it is now? And most people have that. And I always say, like, when my dad died when I was 17. And so they cast their mind back. It's not emotionally hurting them now. And they're like, oh, yes. So, and they're like, okay, so you got over that, you came through it, and you smiled again. So logically, that just drops into their mind is, actually, you know, I can do this. I will be okay. And it's just because when we're in emotion, our mind is just having like, you know, a party in your head of all different, you know, questions and everything. And for whatever reason, as a human, we will always try and beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
It's so true. And people will get their animals put to sleep for absolutely the right reasons because the animal's suffering, and whatever they'll question it. And you just think, you know, and I often say to people, now, if you hadn't been asking this question, like, you know, was it too soon? You'd be saying to me, actually, was it too late? Because for some reason, grief will make us question ourselves and try and punish ourselves, which really is so unnecessary. So my book's about, again, being kinder. Let your mind be kinder to you.
Yeah. And I think, you know, sometimes people can sort of get into the grief hierarchy, if you like, and sort of say, oh, people won't understand that I'm this upset about an animal, or and people sort of say things like, oh, are you going to get another dog, you know, get another horse, or, and they don't really understand, you know, they say it from a good place of trying to help us in our grief.
Absolutely true. And I cover that in my book. And as I say, everybody sees things differently. So therefore, when somebody says, I was like, oh, it's just a cat, that's because of their thinking. So again, I use a technique in the book, and you know, it sounds terrible, but say you hear like a bomb's gone off somewhere, right? And at first, and they go, 20 people will have died or whatever. And at first, it's like shock horror. But once you've heard it about half a dozen times, it's actually not such a shock. So what I say to people is, another technique is, you know, say your dog goes to heaven. So I just say to you, put this in your head first. If I go back to work, for example, and somebody says to me, you know, oh, it was just another dog, you can get yourself another dog. Repeat it to yourself, you know, I pity that person, for they have not had the love of an animal like I have. And I just say, repeat that to yourselves a few times, it goes in your subconscious. So do you know, when somebody says that, it actually isn't such a shock because you've heard it before. So that's a technique, simple, but you know, it can be really, really effective.
And I know that this book specifically doesn't talk so much about the animal communication, but I personally think that communicating with spirit is a really helpful part of, you know, dealing with grief. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because obviously there are a lot of people that are cynical that probably think, oh, what a load of rubbish, you know.
Yeah.
But I've had readings where animals have come through, you know, with my parents, and it's just so incredible. And I just think, gosh, I wish so many people weren't so skeptical, because this is profound and fascinating and so helpful.
No, it's so true. But again, it's kind of like that's the person's learning at that time. And it's, you know, I can remember like spirit sort of saying to me, it's not your fight to have. So if somebody does not believe in what I do, whatever, I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, everyone, and to be honest, years ago, I didn't believe it either. So, but from spirit, when you realize and categorically get information that, you know, that I wouldn't know, but I can tell the owners and stuff. Once you realize that is a life, you know, after this, it's not goodbye forever. They are in spirit, they're fine, and you know, whatever, then it's just like a huge weight off somebody's shoulders. And I have this lovely thing that it's so beautiful, the spirit have explained to me. It's like we have soul families. So say, you know, your dog Jimmy goes to heaven, then Jimmy is like Jimmy will go and he'll join up with a soul family that actually is all related to you. And they don't even need to have known like Uncle David or whatever. But it's so lovely when often, like say, I'll be described somebody. I had a beautiful one recently, and spirit always put it the way they want to put it. And it was a dog that had gone to heaven, and I could smell ferrets. And I'm like, saying to her, this is really random. I said, but I can smell ferrets. And instantly she knew who it was. She said, that's my Uncle Robert. She said he had like a menagerie of animals, and he absolutely loved animals. And so like now she's with him. So it gave that owner and her mom so much peace just to know. So things like that, it could just mend hearts, and it's a lot of pressure on us. But you know, it's just an amazing thing that I've been allowed to do.
Yeah, wow, what a amazing gift that you have to help people with that. Did you have to train for a long time to get?
No, not at all, because basically like the sound strange, I teach people in an hour because I'll show them how it works, see if they can do it, etc., etc. I like to keep things really simple because I believe that the more people that can do this, the more help we can put out there. And at the end of the day, if you have psychic tendencies, there's a very easy way to find out if you do or if you don't. And then how to get information to get past basically our logical brain is the key to this. So once I show the techniques of how I do it, and then people go and practice, and I've got people out there that are working as communicators, you know, in their own right and stuff, from having learned how to do it. So, you know, it's not huge training and stuff. It's actually very kind of like simple to use another part of your brain. And if it's, as I say, loads of people, if I say to them the questions like, do you have dreams that come true? Do you know things before they happen? Things like that. If you do, the chances are you are psychic. So you've got the toolbox. It's like somebody like me will just show you how to use it, and then you go on and use it.
Amazing. So fascinating. And have you noticed that people are becoming more open to this kind
Yes.
of, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, see, I've been doing this for like 15 years, and I used to get quite a lot of stick, to say the least. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But now I will just get emails from people saying, oh, can you talk to my horse? Or something like, oh, so-and-so, you talked to her dog and helped her dog. Can you please help me? And it's just instantly quite normal. But I talk like it's normal because it's my life. Mm-hmm. And I remember going back, I don't know, probably about 5 years, I was doing an interview with the Daily Mirror, and I was at her house chatting to her cats. And then we were talking, and I just said, oh, I was talking to a horse the other day. And she stopped me and she said, you know, Jackie, I've been a journalist for years, and nobody's ever said to me, oh, I was just talking to a horse the other day. But to me, it's normal, you know, and it helps. We give them a voice. So that's the way I see it.
Amazing. Amazing. So do you think that there's any goodness that can come from grief?
Yes, I would say, like in life, I completely and utterly believe that every negative has a positive. You might not see it at the time, but it has. Even like my illness like completely changed my life. It wasn't good at the time because I didn't think I was going to live, but it changed my life. Grief can teach us so much. And also I believe that we all come in with a date to go out. So when a pet goes or a person goes. Well, that was their life. And it's kind of one thing that grief taught me. I'll give you a quick example. Was my cat lived in the middle of the countryside, and somebody had a dream that he got run over, told my husband, who did not tell me, and then 2 weeks later he did get run over. And talking to the person, sort of said, oh, got some bad news. And she just said, oh, I dreamt that 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh. But at the time I was like, oh. But you know, it absolutely showed me that it was obviously set out. We come in with a, you know, lifespan to live, and whether it's short, long, or whatever. And his basic was only 3.5 years. But that taught me that. And I mean, grief, I just broke my heart. He was like my little boy. He was an amazing little being. So from that, but also grief, people are amazed actually sometimes how much strength they've got until you're really pushed to the edge. Sometimes you just don't realize, you know. And then you get the other ones. Funny enough, I was talking to a lady earlier, and through the grief of losing her dog, she's actually become a pet grief counselor. So she's trained to do that. So had she not experienced that, she wouldn't be in a position to empathize truthfully and from her heart with people. So there will be positives, whatever, and accepting that, you know, death, sadly, end of life, whatever, is normal.
Yeah,
it's part of life. And you kind of like also learn, live for the day. We really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so make the best of every single day that you've had.
yeah. I mean, you raise a point that I think about all the time, about death and the time, you know, that we have a sort of set amount of time. And why do you think it is that we just don't live with that awareness, most people, you know? Like if we were walking around more thinking about our mortality, it sounds like a really negative thing, but actually it could be very empowering place to live from.
Yeah, I think because like one, okay, if you're spiritual and you realize that, you know, life goes on and there's a lot of stuff out there that, you know, people obviously don't understand. I don't understand it all either. But however, I've learned to live for the day. But people, a lot of people live in fear. And so their concept is like, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do that. And they don't think, do you know something? It's like when things go wrong in life, like people will be like, oh my God, I can't believe it just happened. This is absolutely awful. I've actually got to the stage of thinking, okay, this wasn't meant to be, but you know, something good will come out of it. So like I always say to people, sometimes like you can go in grief, you can have a relationship that you thought was the best thing in the world, and then all goes wrong. You can grieve for the dream that you thought you had. I say what often happens is look back in your life, and you've probably had other relationships, and at the end of the day, if this one didn't fail, you wouldn't have got the next one. And sometimes like you're thinking when you're really happy, you think, do you know something, if that awful thing hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am now. So it's kind of trying to live and just think, this is my life path. I'm just going to live it exactly the best way I can and accept all the things that happen and learn from them. It's lessons and lessons and lessons in life.
Yeah, lessons and lessons. And like you say, really learning to be present and make the most of every single moment, because we just don't know, you know.
Exactly. And this is how animals live. They don't worry like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm nearly 12, I'm going to get old and stiff, or you know, things like that. They don't live like that. They just wake up every day and live that day as it is, which is a beautiful way to live. It's taught me a lot. And listening again, anybody that gets in touch with their spiritual side or has, you know, positive proof from spirit and stuff, they will realize that actually the intelligence and the information and stuff that you're given is so big and so wise, you know, and it's not clouded by all our, you know, material things that we have in earth. Something just so precious. And I think a lovely little saying that was said to me was, listen and you shall see. And I just think that is so clever. It's sometimes like, you know, people like, but I just think, well, actually sometimes some things are said to me and I just think, oh, okay. But actually I just sit back and listen. And then sometimes stuff comes through and you think, oh my gosh, I really wouldn't have thought of that. Or, oh, okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Actually, one of the lines that I loved in your book where tears are the words. Tears are the words that cannot be said, or something like
I remember my memory is terrible.
that. And I thought it was so beautiful, you know, just about the importance of crying and
Yeah.
that releasing the grief. And
Yeah. And I say to people, never feel guilty about crying. If you want to cry, let it out there. You're just doing a human emotion. But because I work with animals, I think I wrote and I put in every book to try and help people is because, and it's called Letting Go, because so many people have to have their pets put to sleep and they really struggle with that point of view. So I said to Spirit one day, please just help me write a poem to help people. And I think probably one of the best lines in it is, and I just thought my brain would not even make it up. And it just said, this is about having Alan put to sleep. And it said, it was only ever one day in my life. And I thought that is so poignant because the life just continues, even though they're going to spirit. It was just only one other day in their life that they actually got put to sleep.
yeah.
When you look at it, and I just thought that is so clever. And I know it's like touched so many people. Yeah.
Animals can cry.
From the heart, physically, I think you very rarely see it, but emotionally, oh my gosh, absolutely, you know. And they can do the same as people. They can shut down and stuff. And animals grieve. Oh my goodness. And again, like with communication, I had a mare that was so shut down, and she'd had a horrific time on being transported in. She'd folded in a lorry, and I can remember doing the reading. I was thinking, oh, and I was like trying not to get upset, but the whole emotion, the horse was like shouting all this stuff at me. But her main thing was where is my foal? Where's my foal? And basically, they had taken the foal, and the foal survived, but she obviously read it, but the foal survived, and then they sold it or took it away, and that's all she wanted to know was, where is my foal? And we explained to her that it had been sold and it was safe, but because of the circumstances, it couldn't stay with you. And it was like, oh, okay, I've got it. But sometimes it's like the not knowing is same with people. It's sometimes just the not knowing makes life so hard.
And animals are almost like, would you say, more connected to spirit naturally?
Absolutely, because they they can telepath between each other, so that's a natural ability that they have. Spirit, they can see spirit, so sometimes you'll get an animal who just suddenly react to something, and you'll find it's because, say, in houses, you know, animals pass over, whatever, so they're, you know, visiting in the house. And I think the lovely things that animals do, and people listening to this will relate to this, they can have a pet and say that pet goes to heaven, and then they get another one, and that one starts doing things like the other one did. And the reason for that is their previous pet that's now in heaven is saying, do this, it remind them of me. And I've done it. I used to go, my collie, when I got my collie, she used to do something absolutely typical what my cat used to do. And I said, even my husband would go, oh my God, Bonnie used to do that. And you could see it. And we're sure it's her going, do this. And of course, instantly you go, no, like, got the message through.
That is really interesting, because I just told you I had a new puppy.
Yes.
He does something very similar to a dog that we had many years ago.
Perfect.
I had been thinking, maybe it's Percy reincarnated. Yeah.
There's a debate on that, but most animals will say to me, like, you know, I've lived my life, but however, you know, their soul's safely in spirit and still watching over you. But influencing is so good, and you've seen it and recognized it. So your dog from the spirit will be so proud that you've seen it and you know it. Yeah,
and that little dog, Percy, my mum was very, very close to him. Mm-hmm. And when my mum died, he knew before. He was acting very strange, sitting underneath tables and not being himself, like 3 days before my mum passed. Like, he knew it was happening.
Yeah, and they are so intuitive. I can remember when my dad died, he had the most beautiful little dog, and he died very early in the early hours, but the dog was lying on him, and as soon as his heart stopped, the dog just jumped off. And I was like, oh, bless. but absolutely they can know. And there's so much more to animals. And even going a step further is people will bring dogs into, like, say, homes, and if that dog goes and sits up in that bed, often they go, right, okay, they'll get the relatives. That's how clever or amazing intuitive some dogs can be. And it's been proven again and again. So, and bless, so your dog Percy will be back with your mom, soul family. So that is beautiful as well. And I often say to people, like, grief hurts. It seriously does hurt. But imagine having an animal that you love so, so much, and you've lost it, whether it's through tragedy or age or whatever. But imagine you are now gifting that to somebody that you love so much, like your mom. You're like, okay, I've had her. She's now going to you. And that helps people as well. And it's true, because that's what happens. Yeah.
Actually, also having this little dog, I think about my mum a lot now, more, because I think, how would she be with him? Because I haven't had children, so
yeah,
obviously that happens a lot. When you have kids, you think more about your parents if they're not here, perhaps. But with the dog, I'm like, I think, imagining how she would stroke him and talk to him.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing that people feel so overwhelmingly guilty about. And they'll say, I wasn't even as upset when my mother died or my father died and whatever. I'll say that again, don't beat yourself up. Completely understandable, because pets rely on us. They're like a child to us. And you grow up, what your mind learns and expects, like, oh, my parents are older, so they're going to go before me. So you learn to understand these things. So when they happen, it happens. But with your pet, you actually are consumed in every single day of their life, looking after them, doing everything for them like you would a child. And all of a sudden, it's gone. It's so, so hard. So I say to people, yes, completely understandable. Don't beat yourself up because you don't feel, you think, oh, I wasn't so upset with my dad. It is completely understandable. And it's always look at things happening at the time they happen. Don't compare with other times or whatever. It's how you emotionally feel at this time. And that's where we're looking to do the healing for this time, and to help yourself come out of it. And inevitably in life, we will have to deal with a lot of things, but just deal with what is at the time, and not, try and look back and add all different things to it, because that doesn't help you either. Yeah. And people in spirit don't want you to be sad. Animals in spirit don't want you to be sad.
Yeah. And I was thinking a bit about the name of this series, conscious grief. You talk about in your book sort of making your readers think about the inevitable.
Yes.
And preparing in some way, and knowing what your options are, for example.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a sort of conscious way.
It is. Absolutely, because recognizing, and like this is in life, is if you imagine you've got a seesaw in front of you. So if you're emotional and logic, if your emotion's up, your logic's down. So a lot of people will say, something terrible happens, they go to the vet and they make decisions, and afterwards they go, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't put them through this, or whatever. So I say, like, before things like that happen, the good times, just think, okay, what if my animals were put to sleep? What would I want? Would I want them cremated? Would I want a single cremation? Would I want them, or whatever? And then other things, like I say, like I've got a little dog. If he had cancer, I would probably let him go, because at this point in time, I believe that the cancer treatments are not doing enough to extend life, to give them quality. However, if he had to have a leg taken off for whatever reason, he's a little dog, he could fine, I'd have the leg taken off. So if things like that happen, my mind is in the subconscious, it's all prepared. So when you go to the vets and they go, right, what would you want? It will just come forward, and even choosing all the different things that you'd want for, like funeral wise and whatever, it's all just logged there. So it's something you don't have to deal with so much at the time, because you've answered the questions.
Yeah, great idea. I saw the diagram in the book of the logic.
Yeah, and as I said, in life, it's so sensible. And there's a good technique you can use, like you can ask your subconscious to help you. So I would say to people, like, when you're not sure of something, just step back and you just say to yourself, what is the most intelligent thing I can do at this time? So you're like instructing your mind, and it just gives you the ability to step back and think, okay, what is the most intelligent thing to do at this time? Because, often we make rash decisions and think, oh, whoa. So if you're feeling a bit like, I'm not sure what to do, just teach yourself that saying. And I'll tell you, it does help.
Yeah. And just, the more we trust in our own choices, judgments, intuition as well, we can make better choices.
True. And it's kind of like accepting a lot of the time is kind of like what will be, will be. And knowing that, like, okay, if something does go wrong, maybe I didn't purposely mean to do wrong, or something happens, what do I learn from this? What will come out of this? What will make me a better person or a better understanding next time? And it's true. It's like life's experience. And we can't float through life just, so easily and nothing happen. We have to live it and stuff. And as I say, when you've suffered things yourself, like whether it's cancer, bullying, or whatever, grief, when you've suffered it yourself, you are really in a position to help somebody else, because you can empathize from the place of knowing. Because like I say, I've had cancer, and if I say to somebody, if they've not had it, they've no idea what a cancer sufferer feels like. But when you've had it, you've been there, you know it, and therefore you can help others. That's my logic.
Absolutely. And that is a gift.
Yeah, exactly. So every negative has a positive. That's the way I look at life.
Oh, Jackie, I could talk to you all. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
What I would say is grieving, okay, does hurt. There's no getting around that. It will hurt. But you know something? Be proud. If you are really grieving for somebody, do you know what that proves? How much you can love. Because if you don't love deeply, you don't grieve deeply. So just, when things happen, just think, do you know something? It's because I'm so capable of loving that I'm actually capable of grieving like this. But I will get through it.
Yeah. And that is really a beautiful thing, isn't it? It really is.
It is.
It is. Yeah. We are feeling and emotional beings. And in that way, we're really alive and living.
Exactly. And sometimes it can be what people say is like a bit of a burden to be like they call us sensitives, because we get the sensitive to information. So, and sometimes if you're an oversensitive person, it can be a burden. However, on the other side of the coin is that we can often love really, really powerfully and things like that. So, you just have to think, to love is the most amazing thing ever. Yes, if we lose somebody we love, it's going to feel like the worst thing ever. But you had the best thing ever, whether it's a pet, a human, or whatever. Yeah, just do the best you can.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me to help and give perspective on this. Yeah.
Oh, and I wanted to say to the viewers that you can buy the book on Amazon. And if you wanted to book a reading with Jackie, then you can do that on the link below on her website.
Yeah.
And you can do it by Skype, video, or phone call.
Yeah, whatever. Yes, I just, go with the flow. But as I say, my book, I'm so proud because Sally helped me write it, and it's just helping people. And with all my books, I keep the prices down because I just want people to be able to read, learn, and question and think, oh, right. And just take away suffering. And that's what my life's about.
Thank you, Jackie.